So, my fiancé took up cooking during quarantine. We used to cook little and instead ate a lot out of the house. We could afford it and tended to eat healthy. Of course, we can both cook, but given our busy schedule, it was easier to eat out. Also, to be honest, I don't really like cooking and consider it a chore to be avoided. I love food, but there are other things that I would rather do in my own time. Due to quarantine, my fiancé has decided to cook more and has found that she enjoys it a lot. This is great. I am happy for her that she has discovered something new that brings her joy. Turns out she's pretty good at it too, and she cares about learning new skills, etc., so I benefited too. I still don't really like cooking myself, as I said, so in exchange for her putting all that effort into cooking, I help her out by paying for takeout in the evenings when she doesn't feel like cooking, and also I do everything else, wash the dishes, clean the table, etc. on the days she cooks. To the best of my knowledge, she agreed that this was an appropriate compromise, and of course, if she felt it was unfair, I would be happy to fill the gap in other ways. But she seemed to enjoy it. As her culinary experiments expanded into baking and became more complex overall, she began to involve me in cooking. I would go into the kitchen to have a drink and check it out, and she would say, "Oh, could you help me chop this while I fry this?" Or something like that. I cut carrots for her or something like that, chatted with her about food, and then went back to my business. I didn't mind it at all. But gradually I became her sous chef, especially when she wants to cook food together. Keep in mind that her culinary experiments are complex and sometimes take 2 or more hours. So my whole evening goes into these culinary endeavors, and it happens several times a week. On top of that, she tends to boss me around in the kitchen and can be a little rude. As you can probably guess, we got into a fight over this. I told her that I don't like her attitude in the kitchen when I help, and I don't like to cook in general. I would feel better helping her if she wasn't so rude to me. But honestly, I don't want to spend 8+ hours every week cooking. It's not my hobby, it's hers. If she wanted me to take part in cooking, I bought everything or cooked something simple. She was very upset. She said it was unfair, that I was enjoying the fruits of her labor but not doing my part. And that cooking took 2 hours and dishwashing / cleaning only half an hour. I told her that it was her decision to cook very complex dishes and that I would be happy if she made a simple pizza or roast. After a certain point, the sophistication of her dishes moves into hobby territory. And I resent being made to feel like a bad partner because I don't want to spend a few evenings on her hobby. We haven't really worked it out. I actually bought / cooked my own food a few times so I didn't enjoy the fruits of her labor. But that seemed to upset her even more, and our refrigerator started to fill up with more leftover food than she could eat herself. Another time I helped her but told her I had to go on video chat at 8 p.m. and she got upset when I actually stopped helping, and left even though I told her beforehand. I'm afraid I told her somewhat caustically that I was not her sous chef to command the kitchen. I tried to discuss it with her again when we felt calmer. I told her that I liked that she found a new hobby. But it's her hobby and I can't help it and don't want to feel obligated to do it. She countered that it was not feminist of me to put the cooking on her and benefit from it without helping her. The feminist connection doesn't make much sense to me because neither of us used to cook much. And she decided to take up cooking herself, but of course I didn't tell her that. I told her that if she wanted to discuss the division of labor in our household, we could do so and come up with something new that reflected the fact that she now cooks more. We tried to do this, but she wanted to count all the time she spends cooking as time around the house. So, according to her ideal distribution of housework, she spends over 10 hours cooking just dinner each week, which somehow leaves me with almost all other chores around the house. I told her I didn't like it because cooking complicated meals is a hobby. It's not fair to say that 6 / 10 hours of her housework is actually her hobby, and I have to do the equivalent amount of real housework, if that makes sense. So we are in a bit of an impasse. Am I really a bad feminist? I don't think I'm wrong. I'm very familiar with emotional labor, mental stress, and all that, but I may be wrong. I love this woman and obviously want to marry her. But we are usually good at making logical decisions, and this is the first time we have had such a disagreement. I don't know how to get her to understand the line between cooking as a necessary activity and cooking as a hobby. P.S. The fiancé has taken up cooking gourmet meals as a hobby. But now it becomes my responsibility to help out and do more housework that I don't think I should. My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all, and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple, and if they really loved each other his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again, and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am. When I was 19 and a sophomore in college I had a boyfriend I thought I really loved. Looking back maybe it was just teenage puppy love infatuation. Not sure, but I guess it's not important. I know I'm very biased and what I want is what's best for my daughter, but I think my feelings are getting in the way of that. I had been with Tom for about 8 months at that point. He was on the baseball team and very popular. But one day I discovered I was pregnant and told Tom. He freaked out and got super pissed. He demanded I get an abortion, said he would not stay with me otherwise. He did offer to pay the full expenses of it though. So I went to the clinic and I couldn't do it. I'm very pro-choice and told myself the logical thing to do would be to have an abortion. But when it came down to it I just couldn't do it. I admit part of it was that I was afraid, but I also felt an attachment for my baby. The thought of getting rid of him / her made me feel like throwing up. So I told Tom that I did love him and I wasn't trying to trap him, but I simply couldn't have an abortion. Maybe we could look into adoption, but abortion was out. Tom said he had never loved me, and while I was fun I was now causing him too much trouble for him to bother with me anymore. And I was right, I wasn't going to trap him. He said I was free to choose to keep the baby, and he was free to choose to have nothing to do with me or it and to not even think of trying to get child support from him. I won't go into details, but Tom made it clear he would make life as miserable as possible for me if I tried to contact him again, get child support, etc. Maybe it was wrong to do, but I figured all that trouble and drama just wasn't worth it and I would make my own way. I was, however, devastated and completely heartbroken. I admit it really me up. I never spoke with or saw Tom again. I did consider adoption, but in the end, long story short, I chose to keep my child. Faith is for now. It's been a long and hard road, but I graduated college and got a job. We live in a tiny apartment and finances are tight, but we make do. I love Faith like crazy and I do not regret the choice to keep her whatsoever. She makes me a better person and we have a good life. However, 3 days ago I received a letter in the mail. It was from Tom. Inside the envelope was a letter and a check for $3,000. This is what the letter said: Vika, I know this is coming out of nowhere and I'm sorry, but I didn't know a better way to do this. I am so sorry for how I acted 5 years ago. I was selfish and a complete fool. I know that doesn't begin to cover it. These past 5 years have really had an effect on me. I got a job at Restraint. I started hanging out with different people. Good people instead of college jocks. I know I ran from my responsibility and I treated you with callous cruelty. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make it right. Here is a check for $3,000 for Faith. I know that doesn't begin to cover what her expenditures have been, but I wanted to show I am serious about what I'm about to say. I want to be a part of our daughter's life. I will go as slow as you like. I would very much like to set up regular child support payments as well as pay off whatever back child support I owe you for the past 5 years, including hospital appointments during your pregnancy. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to meet my daughter and be a part of her life in whatever way I can. I want to help her and I want to help you and start making up for the terrible way I acted. Here is my contact information. I am willing to do what you ask of me. Thank you for your time. Tom. I was blown away. I'm also beyond pissed off. I'm thinking of the pregnancy I had to deal with after getting dumped like that. Exams and papers I had to write. Giving birth to her on my own. The late night feedings, all the diaper changes, the constant crying. Trying to afford clothes to keep Faith warm during the winter as she grew while also making sure she didn't go hungry, the tantrums. The first steps, first words, the potty training. He wasn't there for any of that, and now he just wants to come waltzing into her life like nothing happened. After doing whatever he felt like now that Faith is out of the unfunny baby years and she's a well-behaved child who can now carry on a conversation and knows how to use toilet and doesn't wake up every 2 hours. Faith has started asking questions like, where is her daddy? How come she doesn't have a daddy? And I've been doing my best. I've been saying mommy doesn't know where daddy is, true until now. And she doesn't have a father because daddy wasn't ready to be one when she was born. Maybe that's the wrong answer, but I am doing my absolute best. I'm thinking of how Tom hurt me and bailed when life got hard. I can't stand the thought of him doing that to Faith. She's a sweetheart and quite sensitive. She doesn't understand unkindness. She makes friends with everyone and is very innocent. I've done my best to teach her to be a calm, kind, respectful person and everyone loves her. However, I do know she needs a good male role model in her life and I do feel guilty for not having one for her. I haven't had a boyfriend or dated since Tom because all my energy and focus has been on graduating college, getting a job, and being a good mother to my daughter. I never really thought about Tom much after Faith was born, but now that I am with this intrusion into our lives, I think I hate and despise him. I want him to just go away. I wanted to not even cash the check and to tell him to take his money and shove it, but my parents and close friends reminded me that that is Faith's money and she is entitled to it, and I agree. At minimum, I want to get some child support going because Faith deserves all the financial assistance and opportunities she can get. However, I know if I get regular child support, Tom will want to be in Faith's life, and frankly, I don't want that. I don't want him to hurt her and bail when life gets hard, because it is when you have a kid. I also feel like he doesn't deserve her. 4-year-olds are a lot more fun than infants. How convenient he suddenly shows up and wants to be a dad when the hardest part is out of the way. But I honestly do want what's best for Faith. I think she deserves to have a good daddy. I just don't think Tom is. I think Faith is better off having no dad than a bad or half-assed one. She deserves the money. But am I right to take the money and not give Tom any access to my daughter? I can't stand the thought of him hurting her. The thought of dropping her off at his house where I don't have access to her makes me want to scream and run away. Am I out of line for taking Tom's money but saying that's as close as he will ever get to her? I am not convinced in the slightest he has changed. I feel like this is guilt money and I want to throw that check in the trash. But it's Faith's money, not mine. Faith and I have a good life, and I feel like Tom is going to ruin that. But is it right to keep Faith from her biological parent when he has sent the money? I hate feeling like I owe her him because of that. P.S. College boyfriend dumped me after I got pregnant and threatened to ruin my life if I tried to talk to or get child support from him. Almost 5 years later, I get a $3,000 check in the mail and a letter apologizing for what he did, and saying he wants to be a dad. I want to tell him to stay the hell away from us, but I want what's best for my child. Tom is listed as the father on the birth certificate. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. He's a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to accompany me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now my best friend got married few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying my best friend has no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go then I'm expected to not go as well, but that is my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum: either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going cause again I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out. He gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked about my boyfriend and they checked and told me he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only he can get me home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding, and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out cause of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing, not his, and he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful cause my friends kept calling to check in on him cause they thought he was really at the hospital. He said I overreacted and that I yelled at the wrong person. He has a history of mental health issues but got better the past few months. He also had a recent death in his family which really affected his health generally.